What's up guys, we are back with another Dragon Ball Z review, and this one is a doozy. So we've gotten what I guess, as far as I know, the biggest Figuarts release that I can think of ever, or in at least a very, very, very long time. I don't know if there's anything that rivals this guy. We are taking a look at the Dragon Ball Z Great Ape Vegeta, so the Ozaru Vegeta when he transforms, when he's fighting Goku in the Saiyan Saga. And yeah, this thing is absolutely massive, so it's hard to overstate just how big this thing is. Until you get it in hand, it's just hard to know, because this thing is truly massive, and it will dwarf every other Figuarts that you've got right now. So as far as packaging goes, mine did take a bit of a hit in shipping, so you're going to see it's a little banged up there. But it's the same kind of thing you would expect to get from every other Figuarts. It's just massive by comparison. So you've got a little bit of a window here, but most of it is covered up by this humongous product shot of Vegeta on the front, and then the side has got a bunch more product shots as well, and then the back is also covered in a number of product shots showcasing all of his accessories, how he can move, the stand that he comes with, all the little to-scale miniature pieces like Yajirobe and the Goku down there. So same kind of packaging you would always expect to get out of Figuarts, just humongous. So yeah, let's do it. Let's pull him out and take a look. And here he is out of the package, our Figuarts Great Ape Vegeta. And this guy was provided for review by Bluefin, so huge thanks to those guys for kicking this one over to me, because there is a lot to talk about here. Not just because he's a massive ape figure, but because it is so different from everything else we've ever gotten. There is a lot of familiar territory here, but at the same time, I mean, just look at the thing. It's so much different. It kind of stands apart, and it very much seems like its own thing that's more of an addition to Figuarts than part of like the regular line, because it's just so unique across everything. But there are all of the normal Figuarts hallmarks when it comes to this guy. So he very much is going to fit really well with our figures, I believe. So let's get started, see what he can do, see how he moves around. There is a lot of familiar territory here, don't get me wrong, but he is also put together a little bit differently, and he might move a little more interestingly than you expect. So to start, we've got a head that can look up, and that's in conjunction with the neck. So there is going to be a little bit of a gap here if you go too far. He can go down really good, which I think is more important for this guy, because he's so big, he should likely be looking down more often than not. You've got tilt side to side, and then you've got rotation. He does have a little bit of snug ball peg up there, so you might get some squeaking going on. We've got an articulated jaw here, which I think is fantastic, so it adds a little bit more of a dynamic look to the figure. And we're going to do this now, rip off the Band-Aid and give you the horror show, because you can pop the mouth off, which helps make this joint a little bit easier to get to. The tongue is articulated, which I had no idea about. That's pretty wild. Definitely different, and certainly just another little thing to add some flair to this guy. You've got arms that can go out at the shoulder really far. I mean, they go higher, than 90 degrees on him. And it is ratcheted, so you're probably going to hear that. There's a lot of ratchets on this guy. And then you've got a bicep swivel. It's very snug, not in the sense that it's too snug, but that it's probably snug in the sense that it's not going to loosen over time. It feels very tight, but in a good way. You've got a double jointed elbow. It really only gets you about 90 degrees though, just based on how the arm is put together. And there is a standard Figuarts ball hinge at the wrist, so you're going to get all the normal rotation and then a hinge up and down that you would expect to find on any other figure. So this thing moves just like you expect it to. Now there is more articulation up here, because he's got the shoulder pads that can move in and out and up and down in conjunction with the arm, and there is a massive butterfly joint on this guy, to the point where it creates some pretty crazy gaps on the back of him. But I do believe that this is really intended for specific poses, especially the one where he's using the extra accessory to hold the little Goku. So he needs to get his arms in front of him as much as possible, and that helps to achieve that. It does look kind of wonky from the back, but you're probably going to be looking at him from the front. So I'm not too upset about that. It kind of is what it is, I think, when it comes to such a massive figure. As far as torso and waist, the torso is really just more of a diaphragm cut that really just allows you to swivel a little bit, so you can move back and forth. There is a little up and a little down, but he has more of that at the waist. So there's actually a hinge inside here, so he can go backwards a little bit, and he goes forwards, and then you can rotate there as well. It's not full rotation though, so he really only goes side to side a little bit, just because he's not a circle, so he really can't rotate entirely. He's more of an oval shape. So eventually the stomach area will start to hit the hips, but he does still move pretty well, and you can use that to get him into some decent enough dynamic poses. Now down below, he does seem to be very familiar territory for most Figuarts. There are just a lot more ratchets to deal with here. But that's a good thing. He needs them down here more than anything just to make sure he is as stable as possible. Because again, this is a very beefy big figure. So legs go out about that far to the side, and then they kick forward that far. You can hear those ratchets. I really hate that sound. It makes me think something's about to break, but in this instance, it's a good thing. He doesn't really go backwards, though. There is a thigh cut up there as well. You do have double jointed knees, and these are ratcheted as well. They really only go about 90 degrees because of how big and bulky they are, but they do go, you know, a full 90. And again, they are ratcheted to help with stability. You've got a ball hinge down here at the ankle, but it's also ratcheted, so you go backwards, forward. You can rotate insofar as you've got the boot cuff to deal with, and then there is, of course, rocker, and you've also got toe hinge. So he does have pretty good range of motion for such a massive figure, and then he's also got the articulated tail back here as well. So it's on a ball that also has a hinge on it, so it's a hinge and swivel ball, basically. So he can go up and down, but then if you swivel it, of course, he can go all the way around, and then you can rotate the tail as well because it's just on a peg. So he does move pretty well. I mean, he is still an absolutely massive figure, so it does present its own challenges. But overall, I've been really surprised with how well he is able to get into specific poses, very iconic scene-specific poses, while also still being very, very stable because they just loaded him up with ratchets. Now, as far as the overall look and feel, I'm going to say right off the bat that I think he looks pretty perfect. There's very little that I would want to change about this guy. One interesting thing is that I'm really not so sure how much paint is on this figure. The more I look at him, the more I realize that even areas where things look like they should be painted are actually separate pieces. There is a ton of molded plastic on this figure, almost all of it, really. Almost everything that you can see is molded plastic that has been attached in one way or another. So there is some paint on the head, but most of this guy is just kind of what you see is what you get, which I guess is kind of impressive at the same time while still being kind of odd. I guess it just comes down to cost effectiveness there. But this figure does, I think, look pretty stellar. He is, of course, you know, incredibly massive, and he's still not exactly in scale with anything. I mean, he's very much just par for the course when it comes to Dragon Ball Z Figuarts, is that they're all sort of in scale, but they're also sort of not a lot of the time. This guy is definitely not. I mean, he's certainly not anywhere near big enough to truly be in scale, but I think the idea comes through pretty well, and honestly, I don't need a 5-foot tall giant ape on my shelf anyway. This guy will definitely suffice, and I think they did a pretty stellar job here. So this, of course, is Vegeta after he is transformed, so his Saiyan armor is a little bit beat up at this point. He's certainly not pristine, so you've got, you know, a ton of battle damage all over the suit. You've got the ripped gloves. You've got the exposed knee down here, so like, you know, this is an example. This is a separate piece. That kneecap is a separate molded piece, so it's just molded plastic. It's not painted when it comes to that down there. You know, you've got the same thing going on with the boots, where they are their own separate piece, so they're all tattered up and done up in just white there as well. You've got the cracked and creviced armor, which I do really, really like. I mean, this is very much something that we don't see a lot when it comes to a lot of battle damage. We don't have tons of Saiyan armor characters anyway still, but we don't have anything that's this damaged and beat up. You can see that there is this little cutout here on the shoulders, and this is probably one of my visual pet peeves with this figure, is that I understand the point here. There is a bar that runs through the figure as far as keeping the butterfly joint intact, which is part of the arm, so it has to be able to sit over that, but at the same time, when you move him, sometimes you can see it, and it's not the greatest thing to see, but I can understand why it's there. It does hide itself pretty well once you get him posed well enough, though. And then you've got, you know, things like the yellow insert on the Saiyan armor, and then of course the shoulder pads, and you've got more of this back here on the back. But all of this, again, is separate pieces. So these are all in. Even the neckline up here that's blue is a separate piece, which I think is pretty interesting. I'm sure there is maybe some sort of an overwash or some kind on this figure, a little bit here and there, but the most of him is an impressive use of molded plastics, which I really do like. And we will do a size comparison, of course, to give you an idea of what this guy stacks up next to other Figuarts. But I think in a general sense, just taken at face value, he is big enough for my taste, just without being enormously so and making the price even more expensive. And he looks like he jumped right out of the screen. And I think that's obviously the goal for the most part, but he looks like his anime counterpart. And I'm really, really pleased with everything. I mean, he certainly looks imposing and menacing. And I mean, it's obviously what it is. It's a giant space ape in armor. And a lot of that, truthfully, does come through the head sculpt. And this is definitely one of my favorite areas of this figure, for sure. I mean, not just because it's, you know, the one thing that truly defines him as a big space ape kind of thing, but because it's really well done. The colors pop. There is a decent amount of paint up here as far as the mouth and the teeth go. So you've got, you know, a solid amount of paint when it comes to the gum line, the inner part of the mouth, and then the teeth itself, which is sculpted really well. A lot of varying sizes and shapes up there just to make it seem a little bit more realistic. Well, as realistic as it can be, I suppose. And then you've got those kind of stark red eyes, which just pop and very much shine in comparison to everything else on this figure, because they're really deep and vibrant and saturated, and it's just a unique color on this figure. So of course you're kind of drawn to that really intense, angry red. And then it's all kind of capped off with the fur sculpt up here, which does look really good. I mean, we've got basically his hair is what it comes down to, and we know that Bandai can do Saiyan hair really well. So this is another instance where they kind of went to town on that sculpt, and there is just a lot of detail crammed up in there. So it's kind of the crowning thing, literally, I suppose, on top of this figure, because there is a lot of detail shoved into what is arguably one of the smallest aspects of this figure. Now, as far as accessories goes, Vegeta has a number of swappable parts to allow him to be put into other poses. So out of the box, he came with the two kind of gripping battle style hands almost, and then you've got a series of other hands to swap out. So we've got a set of fists. I've got one on the left hand over here. So you've got two fists. And then we've also got a right hand pointing finger to swap out right here. And then you've got probably one of the more specific accessories that this guy comes with is the double-handed accessory. And this is what I was talking about when it comes to the butterfly joints, is that you get them fully extended in front of the body, pop these onto either arm, and then you've got him crushing Goku in both hands. And this little guy has a nice sculpt, good paint. Of course, it's very appropriately sized, because again, Vegeta isn't really in scale with the rest of the lines. It's not like you're going to get a Goku in front of him being crushed to death. This guy is to really recreate that scene as appropriately as possible. So I do like that. It's got fantastic detail to it, so it very much looks great with Vegeta here. You've got a swappable faceplate up top. So we've got the battle damage right eye over here, your left. So you've got the scar and the closed eye instead of two open eyes. We do have the cut off tail as well. So you can pop the tail off. It is removable. And you've got this little nub down here sticking out of his butt region. So you've got that, because of course that is another very specific thing. And of course they do provide us a means to actually, you know, demo that as well when you've got him on display, if you so choose. So let me move Vegeta aside briefly, and we've got this thing here. So we do have a stand for him, and it's just a big arm stand, but it's ratcheted as well. It's double hinged, so it's got some movement capability, and it's ratcheted, but it's got a huge wide base down here, so he can very much sit on it with other figures and kind of get a little display going. But it's also got a port on the side here for the little Yajirobe. So you've got, just like Goku, you've got a little Yajirobe here that has him kind of jumping as he cuts off Vegeta's tail. You know, his one claim to fame is that he was the one who did that. So you've got Yajirobe here if you want to recreate that scene. And then of course he is able to be put on display because he's non-movable. He's just a little figurine. But just like Goku, it's a very specific thing, very scene specific, and it's crafted really well. A lot of detail on it, good paint applications, even metallic silver on the sword, for example. So this guy does have a decent amount of stuff. I mean, it's not tons and tons of things, but at the same time, he does have a lot of plastic when it comes to his accessories. There is a lot when it comes to the materials. So it may not be a ton of accessories, but there is a lot here as far as substance goes. A number of hands, extra faceplate, and two very unique accessories when it comes to the Goku hands, and of course, our little Yajirobe. Now, as far as size comparisons go, of course, this thing is bigger than just about every figure you probably own. It's certainly not the largest thing out there, but he is absolutely massive, and there is a lot going on here. So he's about 13 inches tall, and here he is with our standard Saiyan Vegeta, and you can say, I mean, he absolutely dwarfs him. Granted, it's not in scale, and it's not really advertised as such, but you can see that even though they aren't in scale, this is a massive figure in every respect. Height, width, depth, girth, the whole deal. So we've got Vegeta there, but what about Goku? So here he is next to the Saiyan raised on Earth Goku, and I mean, there's still very little comparison because of the fact that he's almost the same size as Vegeta. He's just a slightly larger. Here he is with a 7-inch scale figure, so there he is with Laughing Prince Adam, the ever-present Laughing Prince Adam. What about a, I don't know, maybe a larger Figuarts? So here he is with Android 16. I probably should have used Nappa for this, honestly. But there he is with Android 16, and still he only comes up to about his waist. So this is a very, very beefy figure. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious from the get-go, really. And then how about a Marvel Legends? So there he is with Cyclops, so he's on a Bucky cap mold there. And then let's just do a Stormtrooper, because why not? So we'll take Cyclops away, and we will put a carbonized Stormtrooper in there, and you know, he is also incredibly small. Be good cannon fodder for this big monster. So a lot of size, huge shelf presence. Again, he's not in scale with these other figures in the line, but he's still going to look really cool, very impressive, very imposing alongside the rest of your Dragon Ball figures. So overall, this guy is a lot of fun. He is definitely something to behold when you finally get him in hand. Granted, he is an incredibly expensive action figure, so it may not necessarily be for everyone, but for the staunch Dragon Ball Z Figuarts collector, I mean, this very much is something that I think a lot of folks will want to have, because it's such an iconic thing for Dragon Ball, at least as far as, you know, older Dragon Ball stuff goes. This is very much a big aspect of it, and I'm really surprised that it just happened to begin with. This is never something that I expected Bandai to tackle when it comes to Figuarts, just because of how expensive it truly is. But I think they delivered on a pretty solid product. He moves pretty well for something that is, of course, this large. The detail on the sculpt is really well done. The fact that there is a ton of molded plastic here that isn't painted is still really surprising, but it works quite well, especially to give kind of an animated look to him. He comes with a decent array of accessories, and it's just a fun figure to play around with. I mean, at the end of the day, this thing is an imposing, very, very large, very huge on shelf presence style of figure, and I think it delivers when it comes to that kind of stuff. This is definitely an eye catcher, and it is going to be a focal point for any Dragon Ball Z display. So that's going to do it for this look at the SH Figuarts Great Ape Vegeta. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.